Well, welcome to another series of Braveheart Talks. And I'm super excited for this conversation today because today joining me, I have the beautiful Lauren Windle with me. And I'm going to be chatting to Lauren because honestly, I believe that her story is so impactful and so insightful that it's really going to resonate and help many people. Lauren is a new friend in my world that I have absolutely loved getting to know. And I'm so grateful, Lauren. Can I just say hi and thank you so much for coming on this podcast and being willing to share with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm honored to be here.
Yes, you actually sound like a newsreader. You have one of those beautiful voices that just
I'll take it.
it's
I'll
just
take
it's
it.
very nice, very well spoken English. Um, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a recap just to give our listeners today, just give them a little bit of insight into your world, and
Okay.
then we'll go from there and just peel back the layers and just see where God takes this conversation. And so I know that you're an incredibly talented woman and an incredibly busy lady. You are an author, you are a speaker, you are a journalist. I also know from the previous times that we've spoken that it was back in April of 2014 that you became clean and free from alcohol addiction and drug
Mhm.
addiction.
Yeah.
And what a story that has been. And I know that it was literally very soon. In fact, if I'm right, it was days after that you
Mm.
found Christ and turned your life onto a completely a new story and a new just a whole new way ahead of you, a way of doing life. And so I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But I also know that since then you've been doing some phenomenal work, helping other people, helping women become free of their addictions. And you also got on to do a TED Talk, which I'm incredibly inspired by. But let me just start by saying this, Lauren, that your story, it's marked with both brokenness and an incredible story of redemption. And you can't have one without the other, right? You
Mhm.
can't, you have to know brokenness to really know redemption. Could you just tell us maybe a little bit of the backstory of your life and perhaps how it became so wrong in those earlier years? Like, how did you get to the point of becoming addicted to the substances that you did?
Yeah. Well, I was actually raised going to church. My mum took me to church, but my dad wasn't particularly wasn't fussed by faith at
Yeah.
all. But so I went when I was younger, and I didn't really like church. I didn't really get on board with that. I thought I liked the God thing. I thought there was something in that. And I would pray to God and things, but actually church and Sunday school and stuff. And I found Christians quite judgmental. And, I think there are lots of people, particularly in the sort of, my parents' generation, my generation, who'll say that actually they found Christians at times like really quite hard work. And I
Yeah.
remember, yeah, I just didn't enjoy it. So when I was 13, I was allowed to leave and stop going. And my parents said that my mum said that was fine. I was old enough to stay home. And I opted to stay home straight away. But I was also quite it's funny because we've got all of this kind of language for this stuff now, but what I would now call socially anxious, but I wouldn't, I just felt weird around people, like I wouldn't have
Yeah.
known how to
We
sort of
didn't have the
say,
labels, did we?
yeah, we didn't, you just like, you're just a person who freaks out a bit sometimes, that was kind of me. I felt so socially anxious and I was so desperate. Like I prized popularity above everything. What other people thought of me mattered so much. And for a teenage girl, right, that's tough because the people around you are not always that kind. Certainly, like that's not what I experienced at school. Um so uh, so then I sort of found drinking, and I was like, could get my hands on a bit of alcohol, not that much, didn't have that much money, but could drink, and I just instantly loved it. And it felt like just cut something off between that anxiousness and the rest of me, you know?
Did you find that alcohol helped you find your voice? Like gave you the confidence that you perhaps didn't have when you were around people?
Yeah, I was always quite loud, always quite chatty, but whether people thought I was confident or not, on
Yeah.
the inside, like I was just terrified I'd said the wrong thing constantly. And I had people often say about people in recovery or addicts that we can sometimes have like massive egos but really small self-esteem.
Wow.
And I think that that was kind of me. And it's kind of painful to say and admit that. Like, I really wanted amazing things for myself and to be the best and to be the most popular and whatever. But actually, what I felt I deserved on the inside was really, really very little. But
Wow.
like alcohol was a solution to that. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to engage with it. You know, I felt like I was more fun when I was drinking. I definitely wasn't, but my perception was that I was, and that was all that mattered.
So how
Yeah.
old were you when you started drinking?
Yeah, like 13, 14.
So
But
young.
things, yeah, it's so young, isn't it? And actually, like, it was before they'd really tightened up on the like licensing laws and you needed IDs and stuff like that. So when I was 17, it was way harder to get your hands on alcohol because they'd introduced like Challenge 21 and you needed ID. Whereas before that, anyone served you anywhere,
Yeah.
really, and they didn't really care. And people used to pick up alcohol for their parents and cigarettes for their parents and stuff like that.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it wasn't seen as that crazy to sell a 13-year-old alcohol. Whereas these days you'd be like, what on earth are you doing? You know, like you just get arrested instantly or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, but for me then I carried on like that, drinking away, and I'd occasionally like smoke a bit of weed if someone offered it to me or something, but I didn't really get into drugs particularly, but I loved drinking. Drinking was I just was wanted to drink as much as I could possibly afford to all the time. And it was when I got to university that suddenly I got a student loan, which meant I had access to more money than I'd had before, which is obviously not a huge amount of money and you're supposed
Yeah.
to pace yourself. But I had never had like, oh, here's £1,000 or however much it was. So I could drink as much as I wanted, really. And that's, yeah, and also drinking culture at university is like let's do shots, let's go on a pub crawl. Like all the socializing is built around how much you can drink and how much you drink and how long you can stay out. So I was kind of, even though I was drinking very much in like an alcoholic way, you're hiding in plain sight. You know, everyone just thinks, well, that's freshers week, that's students, that's what we do. No one stops to go like, is Lauren okay, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? It's always a downward spiral. And I think anytime that you think you are really in control of
Mm,
your own life is a real clear indicator that actually your life is beginning to spiral. And clearly for you, it went from there and progressed into something else. Talk us through those stages and what that looked like for you.
yeah, so I was in a relationship whilst I was at university, and then that completely broke down. And I'd put so much of my identity in this guy who I was. I was his partner. I was so proud to be his partner. You know, we would have a family together. We'd get two dogs. You know, that was going to be my life. I hadn't really thought much beyond that, to be
Yeah.
honest. So that was my purpose and my identity. He was my person. And then he broke up with me, and that was gone. And it was like, well, who am I and what am I doing now? And I just I just kind of continued to spiral, continued to drink really heavily. And then I got this job in events and marketing for like a group of restaurants and bars in London, which to me was like fabulous. And like, you know, I've always just been so desperate to be popular. And this is like a popular person's job, you know, like I can get you in here and I can have a drink with you here and I could sign off budgets for drinking,
Wow.
you know, like, you know, oh, let's start with a bottle of champagne. And I could just expense that. And it was totally
Wow.
acceptable because I was like entertaining. So to me, you know, when I say that, that kind of makes it sound like the dream job. But actually, for somebody who's not in control of their drinking, for it to be part of your job to socialize, for it to be part of your job to be popular, when you make popularity your total whole world and idol, it was just a recipe for me to completely lose myself. And then somebody offered me a line of cocaine. And it's like, why wouldn't I? I
Yeah.
have no sort of purpose or identity. My identity was being a party girl, a line of, party girl who does cocaine, that's perfect. That totally fits in with it. Like I'm the most fun. I pick up the drugs. I bring the drinks. I dance on the table. Don't go for lunch with Lauren because you won't get home till lunchtime the next day and you'll be missing a shoe. I wanted to be that person. I thought that was amazing. That was the identity I wanted.
And it helps you feel like you're thriving in the world because what you're doing is so acceptable. I mean, before I'm doing what I'm doing now, my background was in the hair and beauty industry. We did a lot of fashion shows and just all of that background work. But being in that environment, they always wanted to go on nights out, and I was the church girl back then, and I always knew what the nights out looked like. And it was always that. It was the shots, it was the alcohol, it was doing the lines in the toilet and in the bathrooms. And I know how normal that is in the world. I think we talk about it now in this environment and we can see clearly, because that's what the word of God does. It helps us see clearly, and we can see clearly how damaging and how destructive and how out of control that you are, but you don't think so at the time. So how did it progress for you, and what was the point of change where you reached out for help?
Well, things went downhill really quickly because what started off the first time I took it, it was one time a week. And then the next week I was taking it 3 times that week. And then that was kind of just me. Like I was a person who regularly took cocaine. And I, initially it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel important for me to say no to it. But by the time I realized how important it was that I say no, my ability to do so in my own strength was just gone. I had lost control of myself completely. And from that place, I wasn't sleeping properly because that's, cocaine, your heart just races, you're not able to get to sleep. And then you lie there just hating yourself, wondering why you've done this to yourself again, making these big promises. Oh, I'm not going to do this next time. Tomorrow is a line in the sand. I'm going to stop from now and I'm just going to drink, or I'm just going to do this, or I'm just going to do it on weekends. You make all these deals with yourself, and actually every time and time again, I would go back on those things and I would just feel so miserable. And my good friends distanced themselves from me. And even a friend who went to church with me when I was really, really young, and she stopped going when she was 12, was only around the same age. She said to me, I think you should go back to church. And she didn't even go to church. And I literally laughed in her face. And I was like, church wouldn't want me. Like, what are you talking about? And she was like, you're such, you're just making such a mess of this, you're just constantly unhappy, constantly late for work, constantly letting down your friends, constantly not showing up, constantly miserable, constantly making promises that you're breaking. And I just realized that I was just in this cage, and I built it around myself. I'd been there laying each brick with every bad decision until I was completely trapped and I couldn't see a way out.
Wow.
And it was, I had these physical symptoms like floaters in front of my eyes and numbness in my fingers and toes. And I got nosebleeds and memory loss and all of this kind of stuff. And I think it was, there are lots of points that I could say like that was a tipping point or that was a rock bottom. But it was, I was like, my alarm went off to tell me, it's 7:30, get up and, go to work. And I was still awake, still taking cocaine from the night before.
Wow.
Like still going. And I remember thinking like, I've really messed up. And I called my boss and I said, I'm not coming in, I'm high. And she was like, okay. I think she could tell, like, obviously that's totally unacceptable as an employer, but she knew I was like, I wasn't just I was taking the mic, but also she could tell that there was like, I needed help, so she was like, okay, go to bed, sleep off. I'm going to call you at the end of the day and we'll have a conversation. And I called my sister as well. And I said, when you're done with work, can you come over? And my sister had stayed in church, when my mum had given us that choice at 13, she kept going. So I said to my sister, like, I'm taking cocaine and I don't know what to do about it. And she moved me in with her and she took me to church that Sunday. And she typed out a resignation letter for this job and told me, sign it and hand that in on Monday. And she helped me to make some really good changes. And it wasn't instant. There was still like a year or so of me drinking and trying to cut down on drugs. And I cut down a lot, but I was always making promises to myself. And then someone would offer me some, and I'd be like, oh, just this time. I was
Yes.
going back and forward a lot for about a year before things really, really changed.
Wow. And you know what? We can't, I mean, most of us are like that just with food. you know
Making deals, yeah.
and I think we've talked about this before, that it's not the thing per se that you're trying to break free from. It
Mm-hmm.
is the addiction, and addiction is addiction.
Mm.
Whatever we can be addicted to, we're addicted to certain foods that are not good for us. We can be addicted to certain friendship groups that are not good for us. We can be addicted to a certain theme on Netflix that is unwholesome and unhealthy, and it's just trying to break that pattern, break that cycle of constantly going back to doing
Yeah,
that thing. So
totally.
what would you say, Lauren, was that breaking point for you? Like
Yeah.
did you do rehab, or did you actually manage to navigate this on your
Yeah.
own? What did it look like?
Yeah, so I didn't do like an in sort of live-in rehab facility or anything like that. My friends found, they went online and they found these like anonymous support group meetings.
Hmm.
And they said, right, there's one at this time at this place, and we want you to go. And I agreed to go because I thought it would get them off my back. It would buy me a bit more
Yeah.
time. And also I thought it'd be interesting, like I'd watched the American movies and I'd seen these like meetings where they're like, hi, I'm, confessions of a shopaholic, like, hi,
Yes.
I'm blah blah and the stuff. And I was like, that would be so interesting. Like, I'll go and I'll see what happens in those meetings, and I'll probably hear some really interesting stories and stuff like that. But actually, when I got there and I heard people speaking about their experiences, particularly other young women, because I was 25 at the time, so women in their 20s, when I heard them speaking about what they'd experienced and what they'd been through and the decisions they'd made and the shame they felt, I just felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. Like,
Wow.
what they're describing is me, and I've never said it to anyone out loud, and I didn't even really feel like I could say this stuff to myself, but actually, like, that is my experience, and I they needed help and I need help, and I was able to see that mirrored in them. And very quickly I agreed to go to 90 meetings in 90 days.
Wow.
um so I kind of immersed myself in it, even though I wasn't in a sort of all day like facility. I basically like stayed on the sofa and then got up to go to my meeting and then came back. And I honestly, in those early days, I thought like any moment now I'm about to relapse and drink or take a drug again. And I just felt like I was clinging on to every hour I managed. I was like clinging on to. And it was in my third meeting of the 90 that someone said, like, well, you need a higher power. Like, what's your higher power? And for some people it was like nature, or for some people it was like, I don't know, some sort of like, aura or like karma or something like that. And then some people had like a sort of traditional religion that they subscribed to, and they were like, well, go and work out like what your higher power is. And because I've been raised going to church, I googled, literally just googled like church, and went to the first one that came up.
Incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, and that was
Wow.
it. And I went and I asked for prayer, and they really came around me and introduced me to a women's Bible study that became my sort of community that I walked with weekly from then on.
I've actually got goosebumps while you're speaking about this, because I think this sort of thing, it excites me. And
Yeah,
also I know the essence of Braveheart is that it's to encourage women to have a brave heart and to seize the life in front of them and take ownership of the life you've been given. I
yeah,
think too many people live their lives like a train wreck, like a
mm,
runaway train. It's out of control,
mm,
and they're just going and going and going and going and going until one day there's just a big crash. But
yeah,
that's not the life God gave us. God
mm,
gave us a life, and it's valuable and it's precious. And He said, seize it with both hands. And the enemy comes to steal, kill,
yeah,
steal, and destroy. And he wants to take from you all that God's given you. And I just love the beauty of this. I'm really quite intrigued that you never went. I actually at one point thought you'd gone into a rehab, but you never did that. But you made a commitment to yourself to do these 90 meetings in 90 days, which is phenomenal. And then you did that. I think when we do all that we can do, God will do what only he can do.
Yeah.
And when you've
That's
submitted
so
your,
good.
yeah, when you've
I'm going to remember
submitted,
that and say that at another talk.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so good.
and I love saying that because prayer is not passive. It's not just gentle Jesus, help me in my state, in my sorry state. It is literally, God, I'm going to do all that I can do. I'm going to change what I can change. I'm going to put boundaries and borders in place. I'm going to put discipline in place. And then I'm asking you to do what I cannot do. And for you, the bit that you couldn't do was free yourself from the addiction, but you could start to put principles and things in place and start taking active steps in the right direction. And it was literally on this journey that you completely came back to God. And I love the fact that you got straight into a Bible study. Excites me immensely, because we all know that actually it is only the Word of God that can truly sever
Yeah.
the grips of the past. And I know that when we've spoken before, and I was sharing with you the time that I was sick, that
Yes.
actually, I the doctors would talk about working and doing medicine and we're going to get you well again. And I remember going in prayer and saying to the Lord, I want to be made whole. I don't just want to get better from this. I want to be made whole. And there is such a powerful difference between just getting over something and being made whole. And in your story, Lauren, what I love is that you took all of that from your past and you then went in at some point moving forward, you went into several years of leading a Christian recovery service. I mean, like, wow. So then you then became to walk other young women and different people from different walks of life through the very steps and the cycles that you had been. Can you talk me through that and tell me how God used you in that season?
Gosh, that was so I ran that for 5 years and I started when I was 2 years sober. So I was still had so much to learn about myself and my own sobriety and so much to learn about God as well. And it was this Christian service through the church. So it was based on the 12 steps of recovery, but we brought Bible verses into each step and did it that way. It was a program designed by the Recovery Course, which is a charity, who were really supportive of us setting it up. And do you know, it's so funny because I had such big dreams for like what was going to come of that and how it was all going to play out. And one of the things that I got quite caught up in, and I bet you've got a million stories like this from like all the sort of church leaders that you know and in your time in ministry as well. I was really bothered by the numbers. Like I wanted two things actually. I wanted the numbers and I wanted the credit.
Yeah.
Like when I stepped out, I was like, I want
Says every new leader in any kind of ministry anywhere.
I wanted 300 people to come through the door. I wanted them to turn their lives around. And then I wanted them to stand up at their weddings and be like, but really the person to thank is Lauren, you know? like I wanted everyone to know that I'd done this amazing work helping people. And actually what happened is we got maybe the first time we ran it, and it increased in number as we went because people heard about it and they saw it work and stuff. But the first time we got maybe 10 people through the door. And by the time we'd finished the course, there were 2 people left. And I remember thinking, like, have I failed here? But those 2 people are still in their sobriety now. And they came back as leaders and led other people through afterwards. And we had one person came through the program and found sobriety, which was amazing. And then she stood up in front of her church and was baptized. And she went to the same church as me. And in her baptism talk, she didn't say, she didn't credit, and I had like spent hours with her and da da da. And she didn't say my name. She spoke about her sobriety, so it wasn't that she was trying to keep that secret, but she didn't say my name. And I prayed afterwards, and I was like, God, I think this isn't right. How much that bothers me, and God was like, it, you really challenged me. So from then on, I have always prayed. And sometimes I've had to really push myself and say, like, God, make sure that I mean this, but let them be saved and let them never use my name, and always use your name when they speak about
So
what
good.
happened to them. And yeah, and it's exciting. You know, the main thing that we can offer when we do any ministry, or me as a person in recovery who mentors and sponsors other people who are trying to find that recovery, either through that course or on a sort of one-on-one, is just consistency, because so many people believe that they are not worth showing up for. You know, I didn't believe I was worth showing up for. And I believed that if people really knew me, they wouldn't like me and they wouldn't stick around. And if they really knew some of the things I'd done, when I sort of, part of the 12 steps is confessing, you know, ways you've harmed people, the resentments you've got. I was like, if I say this stuff out loud, this person is gone. So what someone showed me, and what the church showed me, what that Bible study group showed me, is actually, you can have bad days, you can have good days. You know, we want all of you, and we love you, and we're here while you work this stuff out. And being able to just sit next to someone and be like, it really doesn't matter what you're about to tell me, I'm still here and you're still loved. That, I think, is, that's what, that consistency is how we show up, so that God can do what only he can do.
That's incredible. And consistency is such a key word. And I think it's an attribute that is almost missing out of society today, because people change jobs, change partners, literally, you know, change. And it's like we get bored. So, and it's not working, and it's not, and we move and we change. And actually, we need to just stick at things. And I think that the Christian walk, it's not a feeling, it's a faith. So you can't go with what you feel. You can't go off, you know, do I feel like this is going well or not? No. Did God ask me to do this or not? And I love, so many people will ask me, what's my purpose? What's my purpose in life? And I will be like, well, what's your life being about? Because I believe that even, you know, nothing is wasted in God. And some of the things you go through is so that somebody else doesn't have to, because you will go and fight through the thicket and carve a pathway that you can then just lead others through, and they have to do it themselves, but really you're leading them because you've already walked this walk before, and you've already done this journey. And I think your story just became so powerful and so influential, and you just made me laugh there. Thank you so much for your honesty, because any woman who's listening to this podcast today who says it's never about me and it's never about the numbers, I would be like, well, check yourself, because you is female, and
We can't help.
and we've all been there and done it. You know, I thought we'd have 500 people the day we opened Liverpool One Church. 500 people would walk through the doors, and there was 15 of us. And it remained that way for a long time. And we're in a different story now. But, you know, God had to take me on the journey like it. And you are right. It's all about pointing glory back to him. We're just tools that he's using along the way.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about you getting an accolade or me getting an accolade. It's about, is that woman's life coming right? And is she glorifying God? Great. That's the place we all need to get to. So just encourage you listeners to just be like, allow your life to minister to other people, because whatever you've been through, you can walk someone else through. But your journey then took you in about 2018. You went and did a TED Talk.
Yeah, I
And
did.
that's really exciting, because then it just wildly and widely opened a platform up for you to be speaking. So, in light of what we've just said, how did that help you keep your feet grounded? In other words, not making it all about, hey, I'm Lauren and this is what I've done. And okay, let me put it like this. How do you share your story and keep giving the glory back to God, even on
Yeah.
secular platforms?
Yeah, and actually the TED Talk's a really good example of that because it is a secular platform, and what I had written was very much didn't really touch on faith at all, even though the principles I was talking through were sort of steeped in biblical principles. I didn't specify that. But on the day, there was a woman who was a journalist who spoke before me, and she spoke really passionately about her Christian faith. And I thought, hang on a second, they've not stopped her from doing that.
Yeah.
And she's done it. And she spoke about basically a Christian version of manifesting. So not manifesting at all, but actually like praying and
Yeah.
trusting and having faith, and how being open to things and seeing
Yeah.
what comes your way, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that was her talk, and she was so straight about her faith. And then also someone came and spoke from Christine Kane's
A20,
charity,
yes,
yeah,
A21.
A21, and they specified that they were Christian, and they spoke about their work. And I was like, hang on a second, everyone else has put their faith in and I haven't. So I said in the talk, yeah, when it comes to higher power, I go to church, I'm a Christian, so that's my higher power. And I sort of specified it. And actually, a number of Christian people reached out to me afterwards and were like, so pleased you said that. We'd love to have you come and speak at my church and blah, blah, blah. So actually,
Amazing.
yeah, it meant I got opportunities that I maybe wouldn't have afterwards. I'm not going to say that I'm 100% definitely good at always making it not about me. But I think when you're aware of where your blind spots can be,
Yes.
and I pray on it and I try really hard, and I make sure when I do a talk, whether it is in a church setting or in a non-Christian setting, that people know that I believe Jesus saved my life. And sometimes that can feel a little bit like, like, do I want to say that? But I make sure that no one ever doubts where I place the credit. And I don't for a second think that I have got this sobriety or any other opportunity that's come to me in life afterwards because I'm amazing. It's because I believe that God is amazing and that I'm serving him. And sometimes that means turning things down that on the surface look like amazing opportunities for me. But God goes, oh, that one's not for you. And I'm like, oh, but hang on, I'd love to put that on my CV. I'd love to say I spoke there or did
Yeah.
that or wrote for that person. And God's like, no, that one's not you. And
Yes.
it doesn't, and that's
And
it.
he'll
You're not going to
open
do it.
doors. He'll open doorways that you couldn't even possibly begin to open yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
So I
I
think
know
that's
that, yeah, and I
stuff.
know that feeling of speaking in a secular environment and thinking in your head, if I say this about Jesus, it's going to be perceived or it's going to come across. And sometimes we can just negate the work of the Holy Spirit in that moment. Like the words are going to leave your mouth, but how it lands in their hearts is going to be on Him.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes He's just looking for our boldness and our honesty.
Yeah. We can
So,
so quickly say no on behalf of someone else.
mm,
We can go like, oh, if I invite them to church, they'll say no. Or if
yeah,
I invite them to do Alpha, or if I invite them to the Carol concert, if I say like, oh, do you want to hear about my faith? They'll say no. Actually, until you ask the question, you don't know who's going to say no. And you'd be surprised how many people one, and maybe it's not the moment that they convert to faith, but actually it could be a brick in a wall that
yeah,
builds an
yeah.
amazing faith, and you got to lay one of those bricks because you asked the question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. I love that perspective. Lauren, let me just move you on a little bit to the fact that you are an author, written a couple of books, but one of your first books was, let me just quote it right, Notes on Love. And
Yeah,
in it, you just speak so boldly and so honestly about singleness, about
yeah,
dating, about feminism, about the woman. And honestly, I've looked through and seen how you you say or you suggest that the church is, and it's right, the church is very much for marriage, pro families, and we speak into family life quite a lot, but you talk very openly and honestly about being a single woman in a church environment. And you are right. Some women can almost feel like, oh, I'm out of place, or I feel a little bit dysfunctional or a little bit awkward in this space. Just tell me what inspired you to write that, and then just speak into that for me, because I think that is just such a powerful, unaddressed
Yeah.
topic.
I think unaddressed is probably my main motivation behind it, because actually, as I spoke to women in and men, the book's not
Yeah.
just for men, not just for
Okay.
women, but it does tend to resonate. Also, I'm a woman, so I'm speaking from a woman's perspective. It tends to resonate best with women,
Yeah.
really. Which, yeah, I, there are women who are single with the hope of marriage in the future,
Yeah.
and there are women who are single and they are very happy with that, and that is absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some women who the hope and the disappointment has is weighing on them so heavy
Yeah.
as time goes on, and they see people around them getting married and they see that prayer being answered, that it is the single greatest disappointment of their life. And when people preach on a stage or they experience something amazing or whatever, they think like, I would have loved to hear that sermon with my husband, or I would have loved to see those fireworks with my husband. I would have loved to go on that holiday with my husband. And they can experience great things, but there's always this cloud over it. And I'm not saying that that's right. I'm not saying, we are called to live life to its fullest where we are now, whether you're going to get
Yes.
married in a week's time or a year's
Yeah.
time or 10 years time, or actually if you are going to be
Yeah.
single, so, but they know that as well. They know, and they feel guilty about that. But the truth is that it hurts, and it hurts. And they've never heard, a lot of these women have never heard someone stand at the front of church and say, I see you, and I'm sorry that this is so painful. I'm sorry that you feel that you're waiting. And actually, like, we celebrate with those who celebrate really well. We celebrate the weddings, but how good are we at weeping with those people who feel that their hope is being deferred, that they are in a place of disappointment where they feel that they're on a cycle of disappointing dates, or being let down, or being ghosted, or being, upset or rejected? How often do we remind them of their value, that Jesus was single, that John the Baptist was single, that Paul was single, that their lives were full and rich and absolutely incredible? Jesus was fully human. And if fully human means married, then Jesus doesn't count. And we know that that's not the case.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Absolutely. No, I
that's,
love that. I love that perspective, because we are, as women, we were made whole, we were made complete.
mm,
And if you end up marrying a great guy in life, then a great guy in your life, then that is a blessing to your life. It's an add-on, it's a blessing, and obviously brings about a family unit, but it doesn't mean you're any less than a version of womanhood, even
mm,
in your singleness. And one of the things that I'm constantly reminding our girls is going right back to the garden with Eve.
mm,
And the very reason that Eve took the fruit in the first place was because she forgot her true identity, because
mm,
she had been made in the likeness of God. And the
mm,
enemy said to her that if you eat the fruit, you will become like God. So she
mm,
listened to him and she took the fruit to become like someone she was already
yeah,
like. And so she'd already been made whole. And
yeah,
so I love your perspective on that. And I always think what we all want is and it doesn't matter whether it's singleness, or whether it's maybe waiting for a baby,
yeah,
or whether it's something else that we're going through in life. What we want to do is we want to know how long the waiting season
yeah,
is. Like,
yeah,
how long is that, God? Like,
yeah. I can
and
do this if you just tell me what I'm aiming for. Yeah.
and we forget that God operates outside of time. We are confined by time. He is outside of time. But I have often found, but not often, all the time, one of the things that I have found, being a little bit older in life, is I have found that his timing is always beyond perfect, like
Mm.
absolutely perfect.
Mm.
Because for all you single ladies listening, you don't want to marry someone. You
Yeah.
want to marry the one.
Yeah.
You want a man that is so compatible with you that the relationship would just flourish for. And you know what? If that never happened, then you are still healthy, whole, beautifully unique giftings, callings, everything on your life. And I just think that we get so caught up with the
Mm.
when is it going to change for me? And I also think we all have that perspective of the grass is always greener on the other side. So we're
Yes.
always looking over someone else's fence, right? And going, well, if I had their children and not my children, life would be
Yeah.
so much better. Or, you
Easier.
know, yeah, we always want what?
It's it's so true. And actually, I don't think it hurts to remind single people that there are plenty of married people who actually are looking over at single life and going like, oh gosh, if only I didn't have that commitment and I was able to
Time.
go on holiday and I didn't have to check before I spend this money with my partner and all of this kind of stuff. And actually, basically, what you've got are two states which are equal in value. And if you get married and you go from being single to being married, you're swapping the perks and challenges of being single and dating for the perks and challenges of marriage. But there are challenges in both. It is not a solution by any stretch. You know,
No.
marriage is hard. It comes with its own
You
challenges.
are absolutely right. And you know what? It's like whatever season of life you're in, whether you are single, whether you're dating, married, or started a family, the biggest work you will have to do in your life for all of your life is on yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what a beautiful season when you are single to be
Mm.
able to use that time.
Most of the
I
time.
remember my husband um, speaking to our young adults about this whole season of dating, and I remember him saying once, don't marry the one that you want to be with, but marry the one that you can't be without. And then he
Mm.
asked a question and he said, are you the one is looking for?
Mm.
And I just thought, oh, what a beautiful perspective. But even throughout married life and any stage, I can't change my husband, but I can always change myself. And
Yeah.
so you carry on working on yourself all of the time. So let me just ask you this question, Lauren. Across all the different seasons of your life, across
Mm.
all the different things that you've done through the addiction and through the recovery season, through leadership, through writing, teaching, singleness, public life, private life, all of that, what would you say that God has been teaching you most about surrender?
Gosh. Yeah.
Trusting Him, surrendering to Him.
Yeah. It's so funny because you think as an addict that actually like to get sober, you've got to fight. You've got to fight to get there and you've got to push harder and you've got to, you do more and then you'll get where you want to be. And if you just keep fighting, you'll get there. And actually, like in recovery, they'll say, like, we stopped fighting, we surrendered. And I remember someone I was working with, she'd just had a relapse. And she was really trying. She was willing herself to be sober, but she'd just had this slip up. And she was like, how do you do it? How do you, because I'm fighting myself. I'm in this battle in my head. And I was like, look, I hope this doesn't sound too, woohoo for you, but basically like I don't fight. If I wake up every day and I go like, right, it's me versus the devil, and
Yeah.
I'm going to resist temptation and I'm not going to drink today. Right. The second I get in the ring, I lose because when I try and resist alcohol or drugs or whatever, I've seen the mess it gets me in. And then even more recently, when I try and resist any of those things that you mentioned earlier, whether it's, I can make anything an idol, right? Whether it's a
Yes.
TV show or a sport or a guy or food
Yeah.
or whatever, right? If I try and battle that myself, I lose. But when I let God fight for me, he wins every time. So actually, like, the more I submit, the more I listen to the advice, because I don't feel like God sits there and goes like, goes like, you must do this, this, and this, and this. He goes, look, here's what I know is best for you. And you've got the free will to make your choices. But we know it causes you pain when you make a choice that I haven't suggested. So
So
when I
true.
take up these suggestions, when I pray every day, when I do my Bible reading, I'm doing the New Testament in 40 days and I'm loving it. When I'm committed to my church community, when I'm with my prayer triplet, when I'm plugged in to everything that God is calling me and I'm checking in with him, I find myself to be freer than ever. So ironically, the more I submit, the more I surrender, the more my world opens up and I
Amazing.
feel so free. So I love it. I love it.
And I love that. I love your perspective because that really is what casting your cares onto Jesus looks like. Because otherwise, the weight would sit on you. And I think you can visibly see it on people when they're carrying emotional weight or baggage from their past or shame or guilt or whatever. It visibly sits on people. And Jesus said, just cast your cares onto me. Like, and that's not just like being in denial, but that's actively doing something. I'm going to pray. I'm going to commit to reading the word. I'm going to commit to putting one step in front of the other and walking in a different mindset. Lauren, before we end this conversation today, could you speak to some of the women who are listening who may be feeling like they're in a place of being misunderstood or being stuck in particularly a hard season right now? Because I think you've spoken into so much. You've spoken into addiction. You've spoken into recovery and being free from that, and you've spoken into singleness, and you've also spoken into professionalism now, what you get to do in your life's work. But how does a woman who feels far away from God in her mess, what would you say she needs to look out for or listen for to feel closer to God?
Yeah. I think sometimes we can discount ourselves, but actually it's so important to remember that literally no one has made too many bad decisions or is in too much of a mess or has gone too far, is too old, too young to make a positive change. And I feel like God offers conviction that like there's a better way rather than like shame that you're getting it all wrong. Actually, he's like, hey, you're worth investing in. I'm here. I've been investing in you for your whole life. So try this my way, and actually I think someone once said to me that we can sometimes think of hope as like this sort of like feather that you sort of grab onto, and it's a bit fragile and you try and it's a bit wispy and you don't know where it is. But actually hope is like a steel bar. It can be your foundation, it can be your anchor, it can hold you up, it can be your structure. Like we need to stop thinking of God as this sort of like flimsy thing that you can't quite grasp. Actually, this is it. This is what is going to keep you level, that is going to keep you where you're supposed to be, that when the storm comes is going to mean that you get to still be standing. So yeah, I think reframing it, like there's nothing like wishy-washy or silly about hope. It is the ultimate strength to put your hope in God, and he will keep you standing, even when you feel like everything's a mess, and there's no mess that is too big to bring to him.
No, I absolutely agree with you right there. I think he's a big enough God to be able to take on the weight of all of our problems.
Yeah.
And, we should never do it alone. We should, like you said, anchor ourselves in him and hold on, because every storm passes. No season lasts forever. Lauren, I've absolutely just loved having this conversation with you today. It's been really
I could do this for like
inspiring.
another 3 hours. I'm so enjoying you bringing
I
that.
know. I feel like let's
It's
get the
like,
kettle on and let's go a little bit longer. But I will be definitely having you back on here, because I just feel like there are so many different layers that we could peel back and just take a much deeper dive into. And I would love to do that at some point in the future. If you would be up for that, I'm sure we would
always.
too. Okay, brilliant. Well, girls, that's it for this week's Braveheart Talks. But do not forget, conference is only just around the corner. So check out the link in our bio and get your tickets, because we cannot wait. It won't be the same without you in the room. We love you, and we'll see you next week.